Good evening, and welcome to Roots Connections on Q. We should be streaming live on Facebook, but let me just double check that we are good to go, that we are streaming live on Facebook, and I can see that we are. So, welcome to another edition, another episode number 3, actually, of Roots Connections on Q, right here on the big station, Q95. We are simply waiting for the connection to be made with Q95. So I thought I would come on a little bit early and just welcome everyone to the program and say good evening and how you're doing. And go ahead and share the link, send a copy to Mr. Sherwin Norris so he can share it on his end. And of course, we are live on Q95DA.com. We will also be live on Push Past 10, as well as DA Rose. And as always, I will tag a few people who always appreciate when we share the information with them. So go ahead and share the video as we welcome everyone to the program. We have a wonderful program for you this evening. We are joined by Dr. Machel Emanuel, who is a researcher as well as a lecturer at UE Jamaica. And he will tell us all about cannabis production and what is new in the field of the cannabis industry. And then we have Mr. Lynton Scotland, and he's going to tell us about procurement and upscaling our products to make it more marketable, creating a niche market for our products. And we are also joined by Nurse Halima Thomas out there in New Jersey. And I'm very happy that she's joining us because we're kind of all putting the pieces together. You know, she's trying to start this business in Dominica, this agricultural business in Dominica. And she will just tell us about the challenges that she's facing along the way. And what I want us to always think about when we're doing this program, Roots Connections on Q, is the solutions, right? So we see all these great companies doing good things in Dominica, like Jody Dublin and Linvo Ambor. And I just want us to take the formula that they're using to be successful and to just translate it. So come on in, join us on the Facebook Live as we wait the connection to Q95. Let me know if you can hear us loud and clear. Let me know if you can see me just fine. And I will go ahead and just share the link with a couple of folks while we wait for Q95 to connect us to the radio station. So how is everyone doing? I hope that your week is going well. Of course, we are very happy to be here with you. And while we're still waiting, I just want to remind you that tomorrow we have a very important Facebook Live. We have Cecil Schillingford as well as Mr. Brenton Hillier and Miss Lizra Fabian, and we're talking about getting ready for the hurricane season. So as I'm sure most of you know by now, the hurricane season is in full swing in Dominica. So we will talk about how do you get prepared, you know, protecting your life, your property, and your businesses in Dominica. So I hope that you will join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as we talk about hurricane preparedness. So I see that Q95 is with us, and I'm just waiting for the thumbs up so they can let us know that we are live on the radio. And as a matter of fact, I can check the radio. So, right, so I can hear the song is playing, and we're gonna go in 1 minute. Yes, so good evening, and welcome to episode number 3 of Roots Connections on Q. I am Simone Mathieu, and this evening we are joined by Dr. Machel Emanuel, researcher and lecturer in the Department of Life Sciences at the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus, Jamaica. We are also joined by Mr. Lynton Scotland, Chief Procurement Officer at WL Gore and Associates, and we are joined by Miss Halima Thomas, a nurse on an orthopedic neurosurgeon floor at a major hospital in New Jersey, and also a case manager for Medicaid recipients. So this evening we are speaking about economic opportunities in agriculture, and I want to say a special good evening if you're joining us via Q95 radio station, if you're joining us on Q95DA.com, and of course, if you're joining us via Facebook Live. So we look forward to the interaction with you. We look forward to hearing your comments. We look forward to hearing your phone calls as we get ready to speak on this all-important topic of economic opportunities in agriculture. So we're speaking everything from cannabis, medicinal cannabis, to bay oil, coconut oil, all the products that we can create in Dominica. So again, I am Simone Mathieu, and it is wonderful to be in your company as we explore economic opportunities for Dominicans at home and abroad. So a special good evening to you and welcome to the program, and we look forward to your interaction. But before we meet our guests, and I'm very happy that they're joining us this evening, during our last program, we looked at the missed opportunities for creating a thriving agricultural industry. And if you missed that episode as well as episode 1 of the program, please feel free to jump on Q95DA.com for the videos of the first 2 episodes. But we also looked at the promise of the possibilities which still exist when we look at, for example, the businesses that Linvor Ambo with Choco Dominic was able to produce, and we look at the business that Jody Dublin Dangleban, and I want to say congratulations to her. She just received yet another award for her JD's hairline care of products. So we continue to explore economic opportunities, and let us keep in mind that despite the lack of a comprehensive government policy to drive industries like the agricultural industry, we still see that there are opportunities. So that is what I want us to focus on. I want us to focus on what are the existing opportunities and how can other Dominicans at home and abroad benefit from those opportunities. So now don't get me wrong, I know that the governmental policies are very important to guide the processes of the industry, but in the absence of that, and while we continue to pray for change, we have to focus on what we have control of, and we have to keep tapping into our experts, such as the great guests that are joining us today, to figure out how we can build these industries and how we can move Dominica forward. So let us welcome our guests as they join us on the program, and let's make sure that their mics are unmuted. So if your mic is muted, please ensure that it is unmuted as we welcome our guests, and we will go ahead, ladies first. So we will start with Mrs. Halima Thomas. Tell us who you are, which part of Dominica you're from, and the values that you learned growing up in Dominica.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Halima Thomas Abdullah. I am from the beautiful village of Marigot. Everyone know me as Halima Thomas in the village, and then in high school, Halima Abdullah. So some of the values that I learned growing up in Marigot was a sense of hard work, like you had to work to achieve whatever you want. That was instilled in us very early. And also the fact that the tightness of the community and learning how to respect your elders, learning how to participate and cooperate in community events. Those were critical to the success of Marigot, as it still is today. Marigot continues to be a booming village despite the disadvantages that it faces right now. We have a cooperative, we have a fisheries cooperative, and we have several other programs in Marigot that through community collaboration, we're able to still stand firm. So good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Simone, you might be on mute.
Oh, I think I was muted. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm so sorry about that. We're learning the technology, folks. We are all in different areas of the world. Machel, can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
Yes, I'm here.
my apologies for that. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where in Dominica you're from and the values that you learned growing up.
Okay, greetings, listeners. Growing up in Dominica, I grew up in Roseau in Federation Drive. Dominica has like is home to me, still is. Dominica really is what really got me interested in terms of the career that I have today, based on its nature, how green and lush it is, and really showing greater appreciation for life, wildlife, and preserving the environment and so on. So I really give thanks for that groundation where has allowed me to use that as a basis to form a career.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. And Mr. Lynton, Scotland, we'll go over to you and tell us where you're from and the values you learned from growing up in Dominica.
So thank you so much, Simone, and a pleasure to be on the show tonight. So I'm actually from St. Joseph, so as we say, St. Joe. It's interesting as you talk about the values. So I think two things that comes to mind is, and I think it's the same for all of us, is the value of education, right? So that was the key and the avenue to success. Right now in society, and especially some of us who are in the US, if you could sing, you could be successful. If you could dance, you could be successful. If you could dunk a basketball or run, you could be successful. But none of those things mattered in the Caribbean back in the day, because so what? You could play sports. Education was the key. So that was the key one. And then the second, I'd say hard work and determination, right, to succeed. So we all grew up with that work ethic, and then recognized that if we were going to make it and be successful, we had to work hard. There was no substitute for that, no shortcut. So I think those values were instilled in me by my parents from the time I was small, and carried me on to today.
Yes, thank you for that. And one of the reasons I do this program is I want us to celebrate our connections to Dominica, how despite how far we travel away from Dominica, we're forever rooted and connected to Dominica, and we're always looking for opportunities to give back to Dominica. So one of the things I always like for us to do when we get started with the program is just to talk about the people, the institutions in Dominica that instilled those values within us and allowed us to be the people that we are today, that we carry with us today. But before I do, I also want to remember to thank Mr. Lambert Charles, who is on the console at Q95 radio station. He will be taking the calls on our behalf, as well as Mr. Sherwin Norris, and of course, Mr. Sheridan Gregoire, for giving us this platform to do this program. So let's talk about the institutions and the people who we can thank for helping to create the wonderful and professional people that we are today. So Halima, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, my education at the West Marigot Government School, that's where I started off. We had a motto called, the symbol was the sun. And what they taught us was the symbol is the rising sun, of which there is no higher call. And to this day, you can ask anyone graduating from that elementary school, they can still quote those verses. They can quote verses from just basic poetry that we had given to us. One of my last teachers at that school, the late Richie Lynton, she had a saying that says, the heights by great men reach and kept were not attained by sudden flight, for they, while their companions slept, were toiling upwards in the night. And we used to have to write that in cursive, perfect penmanship. For a mere 7 out of 10, you could never get the 10 out of 10. And it just it just encouraged us to keep working harder and harder and harder. And we had that sense of wanting to impress upon our teachers how hard we were working. And so that kind of work ethic was instilled right there at the Margaret Wayers Government School. I had some other great teachers like teacher Sandra Green, Doris Nelson, Lizzie Charles, and Vina Jacob. Teacher Joan was my first grade teacher. Just fantastic teachers that I can still go back to the village and connect with. And I think that's what really shaped me, was those humble beginnings. And my second part of my journey, which was also at the St. Andrews High School, Mr. David Edwards was my principal, and I cannot thank him for a great 5 years at that institution. And just in and around the village, the Catholic Church, which was where we went to Mass every Sunday, and also the Methodist Church, because my grandfather was Methodist. So we did both. And Girls Brigade, those clubs, we had an etiquette class. Everyone can talk about that etiquette class by teacher Eugene. You had to go to it, and you had to learn how to set a table, and you had to learn how to present yourself. These were the things that made us. That's why you can see so many people from Margaret standing proud and standing tall and never giving up, because we had that kind of value, like it's woven into our fabric. You just can't pull that away from us at all. And so I think those institutions, church, home, I had a saying, church, home, school. That was our life. And just doing other things in the community together, that's what shaped me.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Lynton, we'll go over to you. Tell us about the institutions and the people that you value for instilling your values into you.
Yes, so I will start, again, in St. Joseph and the St. Joseph School, elementary school, we call it. And he was a gentleman by the name of Caleb Laura. So for most people who hear the name Caleb Laura, who was a cricketer, who was as well as an educator and also government minister. And it was under Caleb Laura's leadership that I passed common entrance. And so I still always remember that, and the year that I passed common entrance and then got admitted to grammar school. And then going into grammar school, it's interesting. So I'll kind of date myself, because next year will make it 50 years since we entered grammar school. And so it's also an interesting time, because it's also 50 years since girls were admitted into grammar school on a basis. So next year there's this big, hopefully we have the celebration of DGS 7250. Folks of us who entered grammar school in 72, and then next year will be 50 years since girls entered grammar school. But also, one of the important people in our lives was Alwyn Bully. And it also marks 50 years of Alwyn starting at grammar school, teaching at grammar school. So Dr. Alwyn Bully was one of our teachers, amazing teacher, and just, I still keep in touch with Alwyn today, but just instilled such great values in us. And so for me, that was important. And so I say that in institution from Dominica, I left Dominica when I was in fourth form and then moved to the Virgin Islands. So I didn't complete my high school in Dominica, but I moved to the St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And you talk about institution, and we'll talk about agriculture. One organization that I was really a part of is called FFA. It's called Future Farmers of America. And, I never wanted to be a farmer, so I don't know why I got into that class. But it was interesting because it really taught to that organization taught us the business of agriculture, right? And that was done at the high school level. So we learned about farm equipment, we learned about horticulture, we learned about animal husbandry, we learned all these things. But more importantly, we learned about, we entered speech contests. It was a huge organization all over the United States. And I was the state president for the Virgin Islands chapter of Future Farmers of America. And that's where I really learned. So that institution I always recall because it really helped me in terms of learning. You talk about etiquette and all those things. Being able to go to Washington, D.C. when I was a teenager and visiting the White House, visiting my congressman in Washington, D.C. All of those things I did, and it was through this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And over to you, Machel. Tell us the institutions and people we can credit for your success.
Yeah, well, first of all, I must give my parents utmost credit, Francis and Jackie Emanuel, for really molding me and into the person I am today, So the family structure growing up in Dominica was one that was really tight knit and very strong, Even cousins that were in a different island, we would definitely meet up yearly and just being close family wise. So I must commend my grandparents also for establishing that sort of family structure and real.
Oh, I think we lost Machel. Oh, he's there.
Right. And real how they install that work ethic, So I must commend them first and foremost. And then I attended the St. Mary Primary School and I went on to Dominica Grammar School. And during my formidable education years, the educational structure within Dominica is one that I must commend. And I hope that we work within a proactive manner to ensure that these levels of skills, commitments, and talents continue to be nurtured. Because coming from Dominica and traveling to England to do my sixth form college at Cambridge Tutors, the etiquette and the work ethic that I had coming from Dominica gave me that competitive advantage to continue to stand above within the academic arena. So moving on, that was my going to school in the UK really brought a global perspective to understanding the world and understanding horticulture, agricultural commodities, because that was where I was first introduced to botanical science and get some firsthand experience. So I really commend my parents for giving me these opportunities that are really bearing fruit today.
Yes, and I think we can all see the reason we have this segment of the program because again, it doesn't matter how far we travel, there's always that connection to Dominica in terms of the values and the people that impacted us to create who we are. So while we're on you, Machel, we know that you are a leading researcher in cannabis. And of course, if you're just joining us, this is Roots Connections on Q with Simone Mathieu, and we are talking about economic opportunities in agriculture. And we have one of the leading researchers in the Caribbean in the area of medicinal cannabis, Dr. Machel Emanuel with UWI Mona campus in Jamaica. And we're just interested in the work that you do. So just tell us, about the work that you do and the implications for the Caribbean.
Yes, right. So I'm a horticulturalist by a profession. So my training in terms of university education, I did post harvest. So the work that I really did is in terms of, I did a lot of work based on understanding post-harvest of tropical fruits and vegetables. So how we manage and maintain particular qualities throughout the value chain to minimize waste, where we know in a third world country, we experience sometimes more than 50 to 60% post-harvest waste, from farm waste to transport waste to retail waste to most times consumer waste. So when you add up that 50% or sometimes more.
Let's see if he'll come back. Let's give him 1 minute.
Yes, of what the farmer produces does not necessarily come to the table. So, and then I also conduct research where the use of highly hazardous pesticides within the agricultural sector is posing serious environmental and health risk problems. So we are looking to alternatives like biorationals that would not have the same value based on using these pesticides that would not necessarily kill all the natural enemies and so forth. And in terms of cannabis research, where for the past 5 years, I've been conducting some research where we have published a few papers and we have published standards based on cultivation, processing, and packaging of medical cannabis. And I'm the principal investigator for the Life Science Cannabis Research Group. I also sit as the vice chair for the Bureau of Standards Cannabis Technical Committee, and I'm recently appointed to the Ministry Task Force for cannabis. So we are looking to install some policy changes where we see how the global market is moving and to see how we can position the Caribbean region, particularly Jamaica, to have that competitive advantage from producing a high value commodity with a much lower input cost by utilizing the natural resources that we have within the Caribbean.
Yes, very well said. So I paid attention to some of the information that you were referring to. So your research pretty much surrounds the application, consistency, quality control through the cannabis value chain line. So you're pretty much taking the product from the plant all the way through the value chain line to created it into a product. And it is at that point I want to jump over to Mr. Lynton Scotland as we talk about the importance of taking a product such as cannabis and creating a product that is of value to people, that is marketable, that can give us a niche market out there in the global world that we're able to sell so that we have economic opportunities for Dominicans. And I want to begin, Lynton, if you don't mind, with some of your own work in the area of coconut oil. So I know that you did some work through the University of Dayton, where you as well looked at a particular oil, at the time, coconut oil. And just kind of tell us about your experience with the production of coconut oil in Dominica.
Yes, thank you, Simone. So a couple points just from a background standpoint. So by background, I'm a chemical engineer. So I studied chemical engineering in school. And when one thinks about engineering, and especially in the process engineering, the main thing with engineers, and especially chemical engineers, we take raw materials and we get to finished products, right? So whatever that raw material is, that whole process of taking it from a raw material to a finished products, that's what engineers do, and especially chemical engineers. So when you think of, crude oil and to the point as a raw material, and then the finished product would be gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, plastics. All of that processing is what engineers do. And it's the same thing on the agricultural side, right? So you take the raw material and then you get to the finished product. So that brings me to coconut oil. I went to school in Dayton, Ohio, undergrad in chemical engineering from University of Dayton. And I was on the board of trustees. As a matter of fact, I'm a trustee emeritus at the university. And one of the things, the programs we had is ethos programs. Basically, it's engineers in technical service, humanitarian service. And so what we do is send engineers, our engineering students around the world to help in humanitarian projects, right? And humanitarian projects, it could be clean water, it could be solar, it could be production support and what have you. And so that's something that the university done for years, but we've never done it in the Caribbean. And so we established one connection in Dominica, and this program enabled students to come to Dominica or any parts of the world for 10 weeks and spend time with organizations and helping them in their yield and their throughput and what have you. So we work with the Dominica Manufacturing Association. Savra McKenzie was a key liaison there. And one of the first projects we worked on, the students worked on, was coconut oil. So they were at Barney's Farms in Woodford Hill, and really working at that time, they were making virgin coconut oil, right? So taking coconut and from the raw coconut and getting all the way to coconut oil. And the importance of that work with the students is that through their efforts and experimentation and working with the folks there, they were able to increase the yield of coconut oil, right? So just imagine if to get 1 gallon of coconut oil, you might need to process 50 coconuts, right? Just as an example. And if with that 50 coconuts, now you can get 2 gallons of oil, right? So now you've basically doubled your yield, right? And so that's what, through the experimentation they were doing, they were able to see a 35% improvement in coconut oil, yield of coconut oil, and working with the Barnes Farms. And so that's one of the key projects that we had. And so as we talk about projects in Dominica and things that we can do and products that we want to make, the key thing is, again, we talk about the value chain, we talk about the supply chain, right? All of that is important, but the important thing is how do you maximize your yield? And, Machel talked about, the waste, right? That's from products, right? How you minimize the waste to maximize your profit. That is the key thing with any business. And so in the field that I'm in right now, in procurement, right? And somebody might, well, what is procurement? And I'll say, so most people know about sales, right? You go out and you sell stuff, right? I keep it very simple. You got to buy stuff to make stuff to sell stuff, right? The buying stuff is procurement. The making stuff is manufacturing. The selling stuff is sales, right? And so in the work that I do, I'm on the buying side. I've been on the sales side. I've been on the manufacturing side, but I really like the buying side because we buy all the raw materials that are needed to make the finished products that we make in our company. And so that's really the work that I do, and not only that part of it, but the logistics. How then do you move the products from one place to the other? How you maximize your minimize the cost, your logistics costs. That's all the other things I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And this is where I would like for all of us to jump in. And if you're listening and you're interested in calling us, feel free to do so. And I have the phone numbers right here. If you're in Dominica, you can call us at 449-3095. 3096, 3097, the Digicel number 616-4257. And if you're overseas and you're interested in making a contribution to the program, you can call us at 432-9624. So we're looking forward to your contribution. So Halima and everyone, this is where I would like for us to jump in the conversation and just talk about the importance of creating a niche market for Dominica. So I know, for example, Halima, you're trying to create a farm in Dominica. So just kind of tell us about the challenges that you have been facing in the way of agriculture.
So it's very interesting that the conversation went on from, developing the product to trying to put it through the distribution channels. So where we are right now, we're actually trying to get the product into the soil to grow, because whatever we're deciding to grow, there are some issues in terms of the logistics, and most problems are in the area of labor and the and like having a succinct plan as to how we're going to get the product planted, how we're going to move it from the farm and into a processing plant, and how we would get to distribute it into the international market. So this is where we're meeting with a lot of difficulty. For myself, the process has been very slow. After Hurricane Maria, I went home. I had to clear my own road. That the actual cost of that was $20,000. And that made me start thinking about what is the average farmer? How can they afford to clear a road for $20,000? So lucky for me, I had someone who was able to do it for me at a less price, thank God, just through some connections with some really nice people, and try and start that off. What was interesting was once I cleared the road, the activity on that road doubled. So that, I mean, in 1 week I was there, and it showed me that with the availability of good feeder roads to farms, that's just one thing that farmers need. How could a farmer afford $20,000? For most farmers, that's a third of their income, some even half of their income for the year. And for a young person just starting off, that would be probably all the money that they would get from farming. And so it seems like a deterrence when you're looking at it from that angle. So once we had that done, we decided to clear the land and to break down some of the areas. I didn't want to touch any forests, so I just only wanted to use what was already cleared prior, to just move the shrubs and stuff that was growing. And my major issues that I came upon was having reliable labor. And again, some interesting facts is that we have nationally, we're talking about a shortage of labor. People are saying that there's no work, but I personally been looking for 3 people to employ in the last 3 years. I've been looking for a farm manager, and I've been looking for 2 employees, 2 farmers that would be willing to go back and forth. So, when you look at marketing, because one of my undergrad degrees is in marketing, and it's talking about how you develop the product, the planning process, the product development, how you're going to put it through the different distribution channels, and how you're going to get it out to the consumer. So I am like still stuck in product development, and what's that having me to do is like having to go back and rewrite my plan, because what I thought is not what is. However, I continue to remain positive. I continue to look for solutions, because that's why we're here. We're here to talk about solutions and how we can overcome those hindrances. What can we do to help take that information that our experts like the Machel and Lynton are talking about, and translate it into a language for the local farmer to understand, and bringing it to them, and forming some sort of alliance to someone like myself how do you bring that information to me? It sounds great hearing them talk about it. I can understand the language because, sciences was, again, part of my background along with marketing. But how do you take that information and translate it into a language that a farmer can use every day to produce? And how do we build that network and infrastructure in order to do that? So that's where I am right now. And that's about where I can start talking and opening up the conversation as to how we can redefine ourselves and realign ourselves and change the possibilities and to be more optimistic with our goals in agriculture.
Yeah, and I think it is so important that we're having this conversation because here we have one of the leading researchers in cannabis, medicinal cannabis in the Caribbean with us. And yet I'm just wondering if, Machel, if you've had a conversation with Dominica about the production of medicinal cannabis in Dominica.
Yes, I'm sure the discussion has been taking place, and we have seen some policy announcements towards that. But the implementation, meaning what sort of regulatory framework and how is the policy going to encapsulate that level of economic development that cannabis can bring. We have seen where some of the poorest countries globally have changed their policy framework to attract foreign investment. Jamaica has attracted nearly 50 million US dollars through the past 5 years in foreign investment. So the opportunities are there, but are we going to be reactive or are we going to be proactive? So we need to put the institutions, build the human capacity framework, put the institutions that would test and maintain public health and safety based on quality assurance if we are serious about taking advantage of cultivating such a valuable agricultural commodity.
Yeah, so as far as you know, where are we, even in the conversation about medicinal cannabis in Dominica, where are we at this point?
Well, the thing is, it is definitely a human rights issue based on allowing your population access to health care, which has proven to have much less side effects compared to conventional medicine. We have also seen where epileptic seizures and the use of CBD works wonders. So are you going to continue denying your dementia-related patients who suffer from Alzheimer's and these degenerative illnesses access to medical cannabis? So the discussion is definitely on the hands of the policymakers to make that change and install the regulatory authority and framework who would provide that oversight to govern such a sector and an industry. And we need to understand the backward and forward linkages within the value chain and strengthen the side linkages like the support agencies like the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Tourism, because cannabis is definitely an interdisciplinary approach to generating value from this commodity. So we definitely need to be pragmatic based on how do we plan to approach the value chain from cultivation to processing to value added products, and not just thinking of Dominica as a place to just produce the raw material.
Yes, and anyone has anything they would like to add to that? Lynton, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think what Marshall is talking about is, again, so you have the policy issues, you have which is a key important thing to be resolved. And then after that, you look at the whole value chain from cultivating, processing, and what have you. And so whether it's on this side or any other product, and I go back to what Halima was talking about, because you look at on the front end, that's where she's having the difficulty, right? And so the front end being infrastructure, labor, and then before you even get to production, marketing, selling, transportation, logistics, all of those things come after. But if on the front end, you don't have the right infrastructure, the right labor, it makes it much more difficult, right, to have a sustainable business, right? And so that's some of the challenges that we have. So the whole infrastructure thing. And even when you have that, right, the question about scale, right, it becomes important. So if you have the right infrastructure, the right labor pool, the right production, the right marketing, the right thing, then you can grow and you can scale up, right, and reduce your costs. But if you don't have it on the front end, it makes it very challenging. And so I think that's one of the things that we face is how do we overcome those challenges, right, that we have on the front end to make it more conducive for us to be successful in the endeavors that we choose. And so it's the same thing on the what Machel was talking about. The front end piece is the policy, right? Making sure we have the right policies in place. And once you have that in place, then you can look at, okay, the cultivation, the processing, the value added products, rather than just selling the raw material per se.
Simone, one of the things that we have to look at is in terms of getting to the policy or even writing the policy, how do we as a population lobby the government in order to develop those policies? So I don't know the process. I have never researched it, but I would be very curious as to how do you go about writing policies and presenting it to Parliament for debate on those policies. So for example, if the village of St. Joseph or Margaret or Granby decided that they wanted to go into cannabis production, through the research that's already there, through Machel and through the planning stages with Mr. Lynton, like how do you go about bringing all those people to the round table for a discussion? We seem so divided when it comes to talking, and we need to move from beyond that. We need to say, listen, this is not about what one person is doing, or Margaret versus Granby or St. We need to, as Dominican, understand that this is a national initiative, and we have to come together to form policy and to make policy and to be able to present policy for debates, because the research and everything remains futile if you cannot bring the policy to the place where it can be implemented. So we have all the other Caribbean islands. When you think of Barbados with no access to water, having cannabis deals to make marijuana, and we have such beautiful soil and rich soil that's just ready to like burst those plants open and produce the best, highest quality. We already rated in the top 10 in the world for cocoa production. Why? Quality cocoa. It's because of the soil, the richness of the soil, the atmosphere, all the different elements that come together to produce that good. We have the elements. And so I'm just appealing to the people that are in charge, the Ministry of Agriculture. We really need to move beyond where we are right now. We need to be able and willing to accept the presentation of those policies, to debate on them, to argue the points out without the politics involved, because we have to talk about the politics, and we have to talk about how the politics is dividing our nation, and we have to put that aside. This is for Dominica. I don't care about politics. When I think of cannabis production, I'm thinking of Dominica just developing and you know, coming into the as a major player in the Caribbean and not having to depend on one source of funding or money for our projects in our country. You know, I was taught when I came to America, you need 5 streams of income. Right now, we're on 2 streams of income because we only have the passport sales, and then we have the tourists, and then we have a barely functional agriculture sector. So I would like to see us be able to talk about that openly, like mature individuals. That's where my pet peeve is, you know, and that's where I would like to come into play.
Yes, and we're looking forward to your feedback and your comments. So we'll take a break in just 1 minute so that Lambi can drop the promo and give us the phone numbers again to encourage everyone to call. But we're already getting some good comments coming in, and this one is from Mr. G, and he says, in terms of the cannabis industry, some key requirements are the enabling environment. So somewhat of what you're speaking about, Halima, cultivating the right varieties in the appropriate quantities for throughput in processing, extraction and processing to meet market requirements. So what you were talking about, Lynton, the right legislation, the proper regulations, health considerations in terms of abuse, international competitiveness, so the niche market we talked about, making payments through international banks, considering that in some countries and states, medicinal cannabis products may still be illegal. So much to unpack. So we still have a lot more conversation to go, and we're looking forward to hearing your phone calls and reading your Facebook comments. But in the meantime, let's go over to the studios of Q95, where Mr. Lambert Charles will remind us of the phone numbers that you can call in, and we welcome your calls. Is your mic on? Okay, we'll keep going until Mr. Lambert is ready. So any comments on what Mr. Sheridan Gregoire just shared with us? Are you guys muted?
We were.
Yes, go ahead, Lynton.
Yeah, no, so I think he captured a lot of the areas that we talked about, right? So the whole policy aspect, the whole, the role of different constituents in our society that create that framework for that to happen. That is critical. And the whole aspects of risk, right? And the abuse. And so when one think about this, one think of, well, the abuse, right? But one may not think of the benefits. And the other part of it is the whole e-commerce type of processing, right? And marketing and all of those things. I think I was sharing that technology has enabled us to do things that we never thought possible, right? And if you think back to the times when you were buying something, you'd go to, whatever store, and you'd see it, you'd have to go to a physical brick and mortar store, and you'd see something on the shelf, it would have a price on it, you'd try to buy it, you'd have to bring it to a cash register, and they'd have to wait on the cashier for you to pay for that, and you have to have money for it. All of those has shifted, right? In a sense, the buying experience is completely different. Most people now have what I call the Amazon experience or the online shopping experience, right? So you go on your computer, you identify an item, you just put it in your shopping cart, right? And from there, you check out at the end with your credit card, right? So all of those things that commerce has been enabled through technology, right? And so when you think of the product, that we have, we can have the same enablement through technology, right? And so if you think of products that you might be able to make and market it on your site and be able to sell it from your site and then be able to get payment onto your site, the whole online experience that enables you to reduce your costs and maximize your profit. So I think that's another aspect of it that we can think about it. We can think about. And when we, I go back to I continue the issue of technology, right? Right now, we have so much information. If you think about it, when we had to do research, right? If we had to do research on any topic, we'd have to go to the library. We'd have to get to the encyclopedia and to read up on those things. We don't have this. Right now, you can go online and you can get that. You can Google it, as we would say, or you can say, Alexa, tell me more about this, right? And you can get that information. So information is readily available through us through technology, and commerce is also more readily available to us through technology. And the question is, it is the equal playing field. So in a sense, developed countries don't have any more advantage of that technology than we have. Once you have a computer and you have an internet, you have the information right there and you can utilize the same platform. So that is the great enabler. So whether small countries, big countries, or what have you, you can compete because you share the same technology. And so that's, as we talk about, the process of from a raw materials to a finished product and all the stuff that goes into it, the whole commerce side of it is an important part where we can utilize technology to enable the work that we do.
And
yes, and feel free, Halima and Machel, to jump in as well. But I think that is one of the most critical points that I always want to raise on this program, the importance of e-commerce, because we have to stop thinking of Dominica as just 70,000 people in Dominica. There's about 150,000 of us overseas, and people who love Dominica, who's not from Dominica, who's interested in Dominica and Dominica products. So kind of let's just talk about the importance of e-commerce in terms of being able to sell the products that we're producing in Dominica. Any thoughts on that?
Simone, so recently we had a young man, Anthony Edwards. He's the son of David Edwards and Annie Edwards. And he created this online platform for e-commerce in Dominica. So we already have the technology in place. He has the system and the distribution and the logistics all planned out, and it works exactly like Amazon. But what we don't have is a bulk, and then the distribution channels hit a wall when it comes to exporting to other countries, because when you export, you have agriculture and immigration regulations in other countries, and you also have regulations in Dominica. So for goods to move, we would love to buy everything that's produced in Dominica. Right now, if I could get some good yam or good dasheen and some smoked doad, I would pay anything for it. But it's the distribution channel that's blocked. And the only way to open up the distribution channel goes back again to that round table of government and policy making and decision making. No matter how we turn, it points right back to policy and policy implementation. And you have this man with this beautiful product. It's there. I mean, this is an Oxford graduate that tried the product in Uganda. It worked. It can work for us. It can work and connect us to the entire Caribbean and to North America and Europe. Because once we get out of the wall and away from that, those limitations, especially where agriculture, immigration policies are for bringing in agricultural goods into the country, our governments have to be able to have discussion with other governments to open up those channels for us. There has to be talk about that. in order for us to bring those goods across. The second thing we can do, which is the solution, is to partner with people in Dominica, like Mr. Edwards, and to create enterprise here in the US. So a few good Dominican businessmen who have the capital to create like a franchise-like system within the United States with hubs where products can come to different hubs however we can, and to be distributed in those states, the tri-state, Florida, Houston, California, Chicago. We have to start thinking big and going big. To me, that's how we're going to win this, and start finding out what does it take. So what do we have to do to get out of the bind where we are? How can we get our products into the US? Can we do it with all the restrictions? And when we do, like, what is the VAT, the taxes? Are there any breaks for these farmers? All these go back to that nice round table where the policy and planning and implementation takes place.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you mentioned that. I'm just waiting to see if Lamb is ready to drop the phone numbers. If you're ready, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you're ready. So go ahead and do that. And then I want to come back to that lack of policies that we talked about earlier, Halima, and take the conversation from there. And also look at Barbados and how they're gearing up to take over the cannabis industry in the Caribbean. So Lambi, go ahead, please. I think you might be muted. Yeah, I think he's muted.
Yeah, our numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and the overseas access number is 305-432-9624, and we're taking your calls right now.
Yes, and while we're waiting for these calls to come in, so just let us know when we have a call coming in, Lambi. So yes, so I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about before in terms of what are the opportunities when the government policies are not in place to assist. And I go back again to the Jody Dublins and the Linvo Ambos of the world, that without those government policies, they figured out a way to get their products into international markets. So how are they able to do it, and how are we able to take the formula that they're using so that the next person doesn't have to start from scratch? And Lynton, we had this conversation as well. But before we go there, I just want to ask Machel and just say to you, so the goal of your research, products currently available on the market based on the research that you've done? Okay, he's dropped for a minute. I think he'll be back. I think his internet is inconsistent.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Jamaica has products, and there is a process that allows products to be approved towards the market, and that is really towards maintaining particular efficacy with these products, consistency, and really ensuring public health and safety is maintained through the application of a psychotropic substance such as cannabis. So cannabis is regulations will definitely have to govern how these products are going to be distributed, how are they going to be administered, and on what recommendation particular concentrations and dosages could be used within particular ages or the population generally. So cannabis medicine does not necessarily limit an individual based on the healing properties that cannabis could bring. But I would also like to stress here that consuming cannabis does associate with some negative connotations in regards to schizophrenia, and those sort of conditions have been really exacerbated through the modern day use of how cannabis is generally perceived. So traditionally, cannabis coming from places like Jamaica, Dominica would have never passed 10% THC. In today's world, we are seeing cannabis plants are showing concentrations of nearly 30% THC. So how do you now regulate that? Because you definitely don't want to expose, in terms of the adolescent brain, to such high levels of THC. There is definitely negative implications towards your population and how your population may react to such high THC doses. So the research is there. It's pretty clear to show that cannabis is not just THC and just the plant, but understanding the phytochemical profile based on the various ratios of the cannabinoids, the terpenoids, the flavonoids do provide different levels of treatments, preventive measures based on how you administer cannabis based on dosage.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned before, it seems like Barbados has taken off with this whole medicinal cannabis industry. And I just want us to have a conversation surrounding that, because they launched their program in January of 2021. And it seems like the industry in general is projected to reach a goal of 59 billion with a B US dollars. So I'm just curious as to why we haven't, like Lynton talked about, created a niche market where we can as well tap into that industry, and what are the challenges that are stopping us from tapping into that particular industry, as well as other essential oils, bay oil, coconut oil. Why are we not at the forefront, considering what Halima said, that we have the richest soil, the water, we have everything that we need? So what is stopping us?
So I think having all of those things is important, but it's not sufficient, right? And so you think of what is it that Barbados and many other countries have done to get their products to other markets outside of their country, right? And so it's this whole global trade and regulations and tariffs and duties, and understanding these regulations, and then in tying in with the FDA and all of those things. Because yes, Halima, you can get smoked dowad in the United States. It just may not come from Dominica. It may come from somewhere else, but it is there. So how are they getting it to the US versus us being able to do that? And I would say is the policies, the global trade policies, what they have in collaboration with how they advocate for that in the US, or the data that they provide to the FDA to get those exemptions and what have you. That's what is there. You think about and you know, something that was near to most of us, right, is Brexit, right? Before goods could get across the whole all of Europe without all these tariffs, without all those inspections and what have you, right? And then once you have this Brexit, and then so now in England right now, goods coming from Europe into England have to go, or vice versa, have to go through this massive tariffs, massive inspection stations and lanes and what have you. Those are hindrances to free trade. There's hindrances or barriers to trade. And in some cases, it might be trade protection. And in some cases, it might be barriers, right? So for us, I think we got to understand what are the things that, how we can access those markets, how we can access that global trade, the trade policies, right? Because it's really trade policies between countries that enables those things to move freely, right? And so if Barbados is developing trade policies with the U.S. that enables stuff from Barbados to move freely into the U.S. Those are the kind of things that we need to develop, right? Those trade policies that enables us to be able to do those things.
Absolutely. And we have some great comments coming in via Facebook Live. So again, thank you for everyone who's joining us right here on Roots Connections on Q on the big station Q95. So we have Damian Dublin who says important and timely discussion. David Joseph, pleasant good evening to you as well. Glenda Shillingford, very interesting convo. David Joseph, we have not even begun to scratch the surface when it comes to medicinal cannabis in Dominica. Obviously, our officials are reactive rather than proactive. And we have Peter Carbon, who we know is an expert in agriculture. And he says agriculture is a highly regulated industry. Unless Dominica is prepared to create the institutions and develop a program for implementation, we will never be able to participate in commercial agriculture industries. And then we have Damian Dublin again, and he says, any comments on the discriminatory policies of the receiving markets? So anyone wants to take that question? So he's talking about not just the policies of Dominica, but the policies of the markets which will be receiving those products. Any comments on that?
So I think
Machel, you're muted.
Go ahead, and then answer.
Oh yes, yes, and you definitely have to look from a global, a global perspective based on commerce and how do you plan to enter the markets and what is a sort of competitive advantage and differentiation that you could bring. Definitely, Dominica, we have seen where the world is moving towards supporting products based on consumer-based habits on consuming products that have more moral and ethical value based on how it's produced and how it's been handled. So Dominica seems to be uniquely poised for quite some time to be able to take advantage of these sort of marketing connotations. So based on looking from a global picture, and you have to deal with standards, you got to deal with import and export policies. One of the points that my research has definitely pointed to, based on the current legislative framework that surrounds cannabis throughout the Caribbean region, it has not been consolidated within CARICOM. Everybody seems to want to create an internationally export-oriented industry, and that could definitely pose significant challenges to the region rather than looking at it from a regional perspective, where the Caribbean could be a lot more forceful as a regional bloc competing to the world. And we have also observed where intra-regional trade has definitely been the lowest through the past 30 years within the region, and we have significant issues based on food security and how do we plan to mitigate those environmental shocks that we see annually throughout climate change. So these things are real, and these things are definitely practical to setting a plan and a goal based on how do you plan to move from A to B. Definitely the Caribbean region can generate the level of intra-regional wealth from a commodity such as cannabis. We definitely know you have producer countries, and you also have consumer countries where the local price of cannabis fetches some of the highest prices globally. So understanding that dynamics, understanding manufacturing, Trinidad has a long history and culture with manufacturing and value added goods. We see where there is Belize, Guyana, that has large mainland territories that could exploit cultivation of hemp, industrial hemp, on a much large scale. So understanding the strengths and weaknesses that we have and consolidate based on creating an industry that would generate value locally, regionally, and internationally when we trade. One of the points that my research has pointed to recently is that we need to be aware of big corporations that will enter the space and sort of manipulate production, manipulate the way the policy may be structured to favor foreign investment rather than enabling and empowering the local traditional farmer. So these things are real. We have observed where in the international space, the first world countries, they were persuaded to change their policy for medical reasons mainly. The Caribbean region, we have a very different scenario. The reason is more driven for restorative justice and expunging criminal records and not persecuting people for small possessions of cannabis. So this was our more driving force to change the policy shift. But yet we are left with a medical industry to build where most Caribbean people use cannabis culturally and not necessarily from a medical perspective. So there would need to be a whole new mental shift based on understanding cannabis dosage and microdosing from a medical point of view and maintaining that level of standard public health and safety. And we have seen in the past what agriculture has done to the environment based on causing severe pollution, right? So particularly a place like Dominica where the traditional farmers tend to damage the natural forest just to cultivate one or two crops. That is definitely not sustainable. So from that perspective, we need to understand where we are coming from, where we are now, and where do we plan to go in understanding agriculture from a commodity point of view and adding value along the value chain.
Yes, very good. And I think this conversation is so timely in the time of COVID, where we're seeing the tourism industry on a decline. And that is one of the reasons that Barbados so quickly pivoted towards medicinal cannabis. So I want us to talk about the importance of the changing world and how it is important to be able to pivot and change directions and why we need to be looking at other products. But before we do, we have a comment from Mr. G, and he says the cannabis oils medicinal industry could be used to promote a wellness industry where people could be drawn to Dominica to bask in the wellness that can be derived from bathing in sulfur springs, using cannabis oil-based medicines for internal and external benefits, hiking and mountain climbing. The urgency is to ensure that we do not wait until the market is cornered by others before we step in and take our market share in coconut oils, coconut water, coconut juice for cancers, etc. Any comments on that comment from Mr. G?
Well, he's basically talking about product differentiation. And I see my cousin Carl Kofi James, he mentioned it here as well, developing our own brand so as to differentiate our product. And this gentleman is probably talking about packaging it. So seeing that we may not be able to jump into this 50 billion deal that Barbados has, what about other areas and other ways we can package this thing together? We're already known for being a nature isle, having that natural experience. Can there be a discussion through our government in terms of allowing the people, the local people, to incorporate that into some sort of wellness, wellness planning, wellness retreat planning, and using the medical marijuana or marijuana as they see fit? But then that goes back to what Machel is talking about. And when we do that, we have to think about public health and safety. As a nurse, I have seen marijuana. I don't want to deter anyone from marijuana, but I have seen marijuana, the detrimental side of it, where I even had one patient where we had to literally wash out his lungs to remove all the protein buildup in there. And he ended up with a tracheostomy. On the flip side, I work on the neuroscience floor, and we also deal with epilepsy, which is where we use medical marijuana most effectively for patients that have seizures, whether we're testing it out to see if the patients are going to respond to them. So in this talk about product development and differentiation, there's so many facets to it that would need to be explored within the context of public safety, because we have people coming in for this sort of experience. And if we were going to brand ourselves like that or incorporate it into that sort of wellness experience, we would have to have very strict guidelines and limitations within which people would be able to operate in. So I'm not sure as a nurse, that just gives me goosebumps thinking about how this could be, something that could end up being a public safety issue. I think where we need to move the conversation to in terms of solutions is to open up the conversation to regional governments and just sort of like come together and talk about how we can have that supply and meet the demand, the economics of the supply and demand for medical marijuana versus each little individual island trying to do its own thing or brand itself. We may have a couple retreats that the government may allow this to happen under the guidance of a doctor, but it's not something that's really feasible when you think of public safety issues.
Yeah, excellent. Lynton, any comments on the wellness factor?
Yes, so there are two things I wanted to address, and one was a comment that Damien had on questions on regulatory of discriminatory practices of receiving markets, right? So countries are always going to try to protect their market. So when they look at the balance of trade, how much they import versus what they export, right? And so if you think of the US, there's a huge imbalance of trade between the US and China because we in the US import a whole lot more from China than we export to China, right? So, but in those things, we're talking about such a small component of the market that it's not even a blimp in there. And so while there might be discriminatory practices, I don't think that's a deterrent to what we want to do. The second thing I wanted to mention is relative to what Mr. G talked about, right? And when you think, and I think you mentioned it, Simone, in terms of the changes that's happening in our world and how are we prepared to address that. And in the business world, we use the term VUCA, right? VUCA, right? And it's really a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's the world we live in today, right? And we think about what is important for most people. The things that you hear, and people say organic, you hear about organic foods, right? And that was a big trend and still is. People want to make sure that it is organic and it's sustainable. So the whole aspect of sustainability becomes huge, right? and the supply chain being sustainable, the supply chain being ethical, all of those things. That's what it's trendy today, right? And so the question relative to Mr. G is that when we think about Dominica, if we could package all those things, right? Because we have all the raw ingredients to making this happen, but somehow there's a disconnect between the having the raw materials and being able to get to that finished product in whatever it is, right? And so the complexity that we face, whether it's how we do that, right, is critical. And so the policies have to be right, the infrastructure has to be right, the labor has to be right. All of those things are important to making sure that we get to that point. So I think we can think of that vision of what Dominica could be, right? In terms of having products that are for us wellness, in terms of food, and in terms of medicinal, products that can help, and creating that wellness factor. Just imagine if we could think of Dominica as that wellness environment that people would come to. So from an ecotourism standpoint, that really addresses it. But it starts with that framework of understanding what that vision is and then working tirelessly to achieve that vision. And really then everything that you do is in line with that vision. And the things that you do that is not in line, you got to don't do it. So I say, we think of Dominica as the nature island of the world, or the Caribbean, right? And we talk about clean and green, right? But it's very important that when we maintain that clean and green, and then that whole environmental aspect of it becomes very important, as well as the foods, as well as the medicines, as well as the products that we made. And all of those things have to come together. And I think what is missing is that framework that holds together, and it might be with policies, with regulations, and what have you, but it starts with that vision, then that, and then everybody's working towards that. I think we have a lot of disjointed aspect of it, and that's why we, other countries that have figured it out, they're able to move much quicker, right? And the problem is, if we don't move quick, somebody will, and they will surpass us. Right, and that is what I think has happened. So we have all the raw ingredients, and not only that, we have so many educated people in Dominica and outside of Dominica that can bring all of that together.
Yes.
But what is it that we're missing that can bring all of this together to so that we can have the type of future we want for our country and our children?
Absolutely. And now, Machel, I know you have a time constraint, so I want to check in with you, see how you're doing with the time. I know there's a curfew in Jamaica, so I want to check in with you.
Yeah, I'm good, but I would like to comment based on the last statement that the caller made, right? And it's a big facade to think that people are gonna come to your shores to consume medical cannabis, right? What we have observed based in terms of Jamaica, if you are using medical cannabis in a first world country for medical purposes, and this product has been through the rudiment of various clinical trials and has been proven, and it works for you, 99% that person will be traveling with their medicine to use, right? So what we have observed based on Jamaica, you see where the tourists who partake in medical usage are not necessarily patronizing the legal dispensaries to consume cannabis. They prefer consuming from the traditional man on the street because they are looking for an experience when they travel and not necessarily to indulge in medical consumption. So we need to be very thoughtful of the approach towards those regulations, and how do we really plan to generate revenue from such a commodity, and really we need to look first at what is our local consumption patterns. How is it that we can generate income and wealth from our local populace before thinking internationally? Because for medicinal products to get approved, we definitely don't have that sort of infrastructure to enable instrumentation to do that type of research that could really meet international and global standards. For example, one of the greatest challenges is how are we going to sanitize cannabis to be exported to other international markets, right? So how are you going to do that? You must use some sort of UV light, some sort of radiation, because simple, if you have insect eggs on a bud flower and that gets away in a place like Canada that does not have any natural predators, this could cause a serious agricultural problem. Right. Patients who consume cannabis who have allergies to mold, right? Some sort of radiative treatment, where that sort of infrastructure is going to come from. Is not going to come from the private sector, and it's not going to come from the public sector. So definitely you need to explore public-private partnership relationships that would enable the entire country and the industry to move forward in a concerted manner, right? So these are some of the challenges that we face, and we definitely know that in the next 10 to 15, 20 years, when the whole world is growing cannabis, the value of cannabis is not going to be in the raw flower. It's going to be in the intellectual property, in the value, in the processes that get you from cultivation with your unique environmental conditions, unique soil type, and how do you create intellectual property around that sort of commodity. And that is where the real value and economic wealth could be generated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And also, you know, the beauty of these programs is exactly what I want this to look like. So we have an agricultural entrepreneur who's getting started, and we have two experts who have been through the process of production and the process of procurement and all that stuff. So what I would like for us to do is kind of share what your challenges are, Amma, and how maybe our experts can help you with those. But before we do that, I want to kind of go back to something that Lynton said, and that's just the need to have all the information that we need, sort of like a one-stop shop. So, you know, why is it that it always seems like when we listen to these inspirational stories of Dominicans who have created a product, JD's Naturals comes to mind, and they've been able to export that product, it always sounds like they're starting from scratch. So I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about, Lynton, in terms of just having all the resources readily available. And maybe it's just my ignorance, maybe that already exists in Dominica. So I'm just curious as to if you, Amma, or Machel knows about that one-stop place in Dominica if I was coming in as an agricultural entrepreneur, somebody who was interested in creating a business. Do we know if there is a one-stop location where we can go and get a checklist? This is what you need to do to get your business going. These are the regulations. This is the information that you need. Any thoughts on that?
I don't see, right now there is none that I know of. I shouldn't say there's none that I know of, because of the limitations we face. I mean, even something as basic as we met with our extension officer, we got certain things approved and certain things were supposed to go in a certain direction, and it just some switch in position. And you know, my daughter, who's on the island representing me, keeps calling and a telephone call cannot be returned to say, hey, I am no longer your extension officer. So for me, personally, I am going to take my own difficulties and channel them into something positive. While I may not be a proponent of medical marijuana, because I'm not, because I just see it as, I have seen some of the side effects of it, and I think it's something that we would not be able to manage effectively on the island. And so in that way, I have not really been outspoken as to launching into that type of production, because I can see things getting out of hand in a certain way, because our structure, our policing structure, and our structure to handle emergencies is not, healthcare infrastructure is not fully developed to deal with giving a long lavage to take out protein. Even at my hospital I worked at, we had to take the patient to another place to have it done and bring them back into us. So I have decided that for me personally, what I am going to do is take those challenges and create a new template. So when you ask me, is there a one-stop shop? I would like to move that to a discussion where, can we, the people who are facing the same challenges that I'm facing, you can reach out to me. I have the Dominica Garden Club. Can we come together to create that new template? I'm all about solutions. Even
and I don't mean to interrupt you, Halima, but we have a phone call, so let's
Okay,
make
go ahead.
sure we grab the call. Sorry to interrupt you.
I think we lost that caller.
Oh, that's okay. Were you finished with your thoughts?
No, I was just saying is that where we, so because we'll talk forever, and as Dominicans, we love to talk, and we're very educated people, and we have a lot of degrees, and we have a lot of research, and we have a lot of in the Ministry of Agriculture. I could probably walk in there and get a whole library of things that have already been researched, verified, and put together. But how does that equate? How do you take that and translate that to the farmer in the village? Because when I go to Dominica, I meet that farmer in the village. I talk to those people, and it's not reached them. The information has not reached them. So as entrepreneurs, as people willing to invest in Dominica, we need to be able to come in and fill those gaps. If there's no one-stop shop, we create it. We have to move the dialogue beyond, oh well, the policies, I really don't care if there are no policies. Let's create a new template where we can come together. This is going to take a lot of cooperation on our parts to come together and say, hey, we can create a website. Nobody's stopping us. Go ahead.
Okay, the call. We keep missing our call. Sorry.
Okay, the caller and 95, please go ahead with your call. Go ahead with your call, please. Caller, please go ahead with your call. I think you lost it again.
That's okay. The next time a call comes in, I'm just going to signal a call is coming in, and we're going to cut the call. Lynton, you had any comments? We apologize, callers. We'll get it right.
I'm very passionate about this because I am in a lot of forums, and I just see people talking, and I see people who sit in the diaspora and they have zero idea about what's going on the ground. They think that we think in the diaspora we can take an American version and think it's going to apply to the person in Dominica. We have no idea about their daily challenges. And I always say to them, you need to go to the village. When last were you in the village? Go
Okay,
ahead.
call is coming in.
Caller, please go ahead. Go ahead, please, call. We have some feedback in there. Caller, are you still there?
Okay, while we're waiting, Lynton, you had any comments?
Yeah, so I appreciate your point, and relative. So I say relative to the diaspora, right? And so that's for me. That's one of the reasons I'm back in Dominica almost every year. So COVID prevented me from going back this year, but really spending time in the village. And it's really, there's a lot that we can learn from each other, right? And I say that from a standpoint that we might have certain expertise, but we have to understand the reality on the ground and work within that framework, right? At the same, and while doing that, you also kind of move the reality on the ground and help people see a different way, right? So it's a mix of both. It cannot be, well, this is how you do it because that's what works over here, because it doesn't. It doesn't. And so for me, spending time with folks as much as possible on the ground, understanding what their challenges. That's what in the space that I am in, whether it's in procurement or in engineering or what have you, I'm always looking at what is called continuous improvement. How can we take something and get it better, right? How can we improve yield? How can we improve productivity? That's really the skill sets we learn, right? Is to improve things. And so for small businesses, and I saw, the comment about the wellness industry and some of the things that we're doing with herbal tea. So go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. Let's try to take a call. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lynton. We're still working out the calls.
Yes,
You said herbal tea.
Yeah, the things we're doing with herbal tea, that's great, right? And then how can we improve that and maximize that even further, right? To expand in scale and scope, right? So that's the kind of things that I'm interested in. And so where I know I can provide support and help is really helping businesses go from startups through production and in some cases marketing, right? And finding those opportunities. So that's what I've done, and so that's what I'm looking to see, is that where my expertise can be of assistance, right? Not defining what you should do and shouldn't do, but how can I support the work that you're doing. So even Halima, as you think about on the infrastructure part and labor, I can't do anything about that, right? I mean, that's outside of my scope.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
But in terms of once you get to production, once you get into maximizing your yield, that's kind of things that folks like myself and others can help, and we're more than willing and to help in that, because at the end of the day, we all Dominicans,
Right.
and that's the beauty about it. And we bleed Dominica, we carry Dominica in our heart, whether we're here or there. We are Dominicans, and we want to see our country succeed.
But can we move
and I love the direction this conversation is going, because I think most people who know me know that I'm a very action-oriented person, so I don't do very well with long talk, like they would say in Jamaica. Machel, is that how they say it? So I'm happy with the direction this conversation is going, because we're talking about actionable steps. We're talking about tapping into the expertise of the Lynton Scotlands, the Machel Emanuels of the world, to provide the support for the entrepreneurs who are interested in creating industry and interested in advancing industries in Dominica. Machel, you have any comments?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a business, and a business takes startup and business take operational course, right? So understanding what does it take to start up, based on what sort of incentives are there, what sort of cross prohibitions are there that restricts the entrepreneur from being able to start up, right? So at the startup course, having access to loans, to a capital, to investment, to expertise, to build that model. And then when that is now established, how do you maintain operations based on understanding input cost to cost margins, to understanding how do you sustainably maintain production within trying to mitigate environmental, economic shocks, and still being able to sustainably maintain and operate your business. And we know in developing countries such as Dominica, those things become even more challenging. So the onus is on each and every one of us. Too much time the government is there to be blamed for X, Y, and Z, but it needs to start from the individuals to really lobby and bring it to the table and force the government to make those changes, because it's still the population who puts the government there. So the government should be in service of the people to ensure that particular things are taken care of in a particular food security is key.
Absolutely. Halima, I think you wanted to say something?
Basically, I was saying that, you know, it's taking what everybody here is saying and putting it into a language that the person on the ground can understand. Because while we're talking, you know, the people on the ground, they have issues. They have day-to-day issues. They're young people that don't have access to funding. How can we set up stuff like private funding, crowdfunding, forming cooperatives with the people on the island to come together and pool the resources? And Simone, I love the idea that you talked about the one-stop shop. It's like, let's get an agriculture website going together. We don't have to wait for the government to do that for us. We have 3 people in this forum. I'm sure they're like at least 100 other qualified Dominicans in the area of agriculture that can be listed on that website, you know, whether for a small fee or their expertise, or even creating online modules, education modules, so that a farmer doesn't necessarily feel that their limitations and their access, or the limitations to access is oh, I can't go into the government's office because such and such person there is going to hinder me. That's their day-to-day reality when you walk into that office. If you get into the, I have had the experience of going into the office, and for whatever reason, the person was having a bad day, and I was never going to see the PS or the minister. And that is the little minute, that's the stuff we're dealing with on the ground. But if you have a one-stop shop where we can fund these people locally, where they can access and say, okay, I need a small loan for $100 US, and you have people that are like myself in the diaspora, I'll loan you $100, give me back 5% on it, $5. You pay it back, we give it to somebody else later. And to create those kinds of opportunities for them, where they can come online, whether we pull from YouTube or wherever, but putting it in one place where they can come in and say, oh, I need to know how to do grafting. Well, I can come right here on the website and learn steps A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and learn about grafting. If you want to learn about any other thing, start a business, how to get the product from the planning stage, how to write a small agriculture business plan, how to link the farmer to free resources. That's what I do in the Dominica Garden Club. There are so many free seminars that should be posted daily somewhere, that the people can come together, that people can come and access them. I post them on my webpage because they're there, they're free. You know, I take classes at the Cornell Small Farms. I have linked people in my on my page to the Cornell Small Farms extension programs. I tell everybody, you live in a different state, look up your extension, share what is going on. And they have the information there. It's not like they're saying if you're in Dominica, you can't learn how to compost. I learned to compost from an online seminar, you know? So I'm just saying, like, while we may have a big picture, we can narrow it down to some small, achievable goals that can help impact someone immediately. Because what we're talking about are big plans, cannabis production. The people don't care about that. They want to know how they're going to buy bread tomorrow. They want to find out how they're going to feed their families. They want to learn a skill like yesterday that they can use immediately to create a livelihood for themselves. And so that's why sometimes I just don't even like to talk about it, because then I get upset, because I'm seeing that we have the potential to come together. There are 3 of us here. There's maybe 5 more people. Let's come together and do something to really impact that local person. We do not have to wait for government. There's nothing. The government can never block a Dominican from accessing a website in the US or anywhere in the world. So that's where we have to open up our minds, moving around the barriers. The barriers can stay there. Build a new road, build a roundabout about the barrier. Move on. By the time the barrier will stay there and disintegrate eventually.
Yeah. Absolutely, sir. I'm really happy that we're all capturing the essence of what we are trying to accomplish with this program, that despite the government policies that are not in place, we have the expertise, and we're going to tap into the expertise of all our Dominicans at home and abroad, and we will create our own industries, and we will be able to support each other in the ventures that we are trying to pursue. So we want to give an opportunity to everyone who wants to call into the program as we get ready to wind down. So I'm hoping that Lambi, you will play us a song and give an opportunity for the callers to call in, and then we'll come back to final thoughts. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening.
Oh, children, wanna go.
The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and 305-432-9624.
Ride on this revelation. We've been a subject to master's feet. Oh, bliss. So we wanna go. Yeah. We are a people enslaved and sold. Scattered to the earth. Jacob is calling his children. Pay price, so we want to go. Oh, children, oh, to Zion, oh, wanna go. Oh, to Zion, oh, wanna go.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, good night, Lambi. Good night to the guests.
Good night to you.
Hello. Good night. Lambi, I just want to make a contribution to your program and to the guests. I say good night to the guests. I don't really familiar with the names, but I heard there's somebody from Marigot and St. Joe, and someone else in England, and the young lady from America. I want to really congratulate the last person who speaks. I think she's from Marigot. I want to tell her that's the way to go, because for all these years we've been saying the same thing and nobody's coming to our rescue. I don't think anything is going to happen. I do manufacturing in local products like herbs, spices, oils, and it's the same. And I mean, 1 or 2 people like Junie and these other people, they can break through on the international market. I've got a young lady from Ends, but how many of them? How many people, young people, that have the patience like them to have the passion for this thing? Because they could fill out of blows too. What I believe, as the lady was just saying, I think the same people that on the panel supposed to put things together, where they could set up something in Dominica. It can be a small factory that the people that do manufacturing can go there. They can stay on Zoom wherever they is in the other part of the world, and they can even teach people how to do things better than how they're doing it. Like, for instance, designing, label, processing different. Because I believe where the cold pot soup come from, it was a group of people from Europe, I think Canada, some white Canadian people who come down sometime in the early 80s. And they train some people, I think, in Granby and others. And look at how it goes too. There is nowhere else in the world that makes soups like Heaven Sense and the cold pot soup. We just want to go through. And the gentleman from England was saying the same thing. The trading business is very tough. I have to send 3 bottles of oil to America. It costs me almost $300 to send 3 bottles of oil to America. I have to send 6 bottles of oil to Saudi Arabia. It's like almost $800. It's just not profitable. How are you going to strive from that? Even disaster come and happen on the island of Dominica tomorrow, the World Bank is giving you money, and the World Bank is telling you, if you is a civil servant, you is a policeman, and you're doing farming, you're not required to get that kind of money. So it's better that the government don't accept that money and raise money some other way, where they can balance it. Because the farmer that is a policeman is going to give up, and he might have 2-3 people employed, and they're going to those 2-3 people might have to go home. Look at the Chinese people. The Chinese people send the people all over the world to trade and do business, and they give them money, they give them support. And I really want to tell the lady what she's saying. It makes plenty sense. I mean, all you don't have to depend on the government, all you have the brain. Look at Mr. G. Mr. G had a big garment factory some years back. Why we keep depending on the government? By now, we're supposed to see the government. Don't worry. Sister Nats put up a banana project some years back. She make all different products from bananas. Right in Dominica, she make cheese, she make butter out of bananas. Up to today, it was right there. They always have exhibition under the financial center, which all Dominican people go there and they bring the product right under the ministry building. You want to tell me the politicians don't see it? Come on, man. I mean, I think I don't know what is happening, man. I don't believe the Caribbean politicians, they have a gun to our head, and that's just me, Ron Hussein, man.
Thank you,
the
caller.
Caribbean leaders, they have a gun to our head, and that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution to the program. And indeed, we're all about getting it done ourselves and not relying on government policies that are not in place. And I really like that he stressed the importance of technology as well, the way we can educate each other via Zoom, via Facebook Live, via so many other mediums out there to be able to educate our people. So as we get ready to wind down the program, if we have any final thoughts coming in from the panel, we will go ahead and take your final thoughts. And I hope, Halima, you were able to find some information that will be useful to you in your ventures. So we'll start with you. You're muted. You're muted. Oh, I don't think, can she hear us?
No.
You're muted.
So yeah, sorry. I was saying, yes, I will find ways to overcome my challenges. And I am from Marigot, and we always win. So I am going to take those challenges, like I said, and turn them into something positive. On a closing note, I would like to mention a climate action challenge that we're doing with the schools all over Dominica. This is another initiative. We haven't touched on climate change as yet. That's a whole other show, Simone. But I would like to encourage the principals around Dominica to either contact me via Facebook. It's Amma Thomas, so you can get me through the Dominica Garden Club. We are creating a climate action challenge where we're encouraging the children to get involved in some sort of action. And this is in an international forum. So please do contact me, Amma Thomas, on Facebook or through the Dominica Garden Club.
Yes, thank you so much for your contributions this evening. Machel, you have any final thoughts for us? You're muted. Are you muted? You're still muted.
Yes, and I would like to thank the listeners.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. Yeah, I think there's an issue with his audio. Lynton, you want to go ahead while
Hello?
we figure
Here
out
now?
Machel's? Okay,
Yes,
yes,
we
we
can.
can. Yes, we
Good?
can. Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would like to thank the listeners of 95, both in Dominica and listening via
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm not
good.
sure what's going on.
Yes, I would like to thank the listeners, both locally and I would like to thank you, the host, for inviting me to the program to contribute to Dominica based on to contribute to the discussion surrounding cannabis and agriculture and sustainability. So I look forward to seeing how we could enhance this. Oh.
Yeah, I think Machel, we're having some technical difficulties, but again, thank you for being here and thank you for your contribution to the discussion.
Yeah, so well, I seem to be having some internet issues. So
Yes.
Mr. Lynton could go ahead.
Yes,
But
thank
I
you so much,
thank
Machel.
everybody for
Yeah.
listening.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you, Simone, for the invitation to attend to be on this program. And I really I'm just so amazed every time that I interface with my Dominican people. The brilliance that is out there, it just amazes me. And so, Machel, your contributions and the insights that you have and the deep knowledge and the expertise. I mean, this is that's world class. And I truly appreciate that. The insights that you have, and I just really appreciate the work that you're trying to do. And so, thank you for that opportunity. I think again to the point I said earlier, we have all the ingredients, the people, the skill sets, and whether we've been trained in all different fields of all disciplines and all different places or experiences across the world. That's at the end of the day, we are Dominicans, and we want to make a contribution to our country. And I'm just really thinking about how that comes together. And that's the part that is the secret sauce, per se, that I'm trying to see how we bring that together for the effective utilization of the Dominica, and that we can make an impact on our generations and generations to come. Because to him, much is given, much is required. And we've been blessed with so much. And there's another thing I say, better are small things done than great things planned. So we can plan all those great things, but let's focus on the small things. So I know, what my limitations are. I know what my expertise are. I'm not going to drive into areas that are not my expertise. My passion would be on continuous improvement and helping businesses succeed, right? That's what I can contribute, and helping the youth in terms of putting together a business plan and understanding and education and those kind of things, and training and development to do that. That's what I do. That's where I can contribute, right? And others might have other skill sets, but how do we bring that together? But I really appreciate the opportunity for us to talk through that, but not just talk. Then what do we do afterwards, right? That is really the key. And the aspect of involving in our community. So I would say in any way you can, as whether in Dominica, outside of Dominica, make a contribution to your community. right? That is in a small way you can do. What are you doing for your village? What are you doing for your people? Who are you mentoring and what have you? That's where we start with it and develop our people, our skill set, our people. So that's what I see. So I appreciate the opportunity and for us to discuss. And I'm just so honored to be among such distinguished people and who makes amazing contributions in their field. And Lambi, thank you so much for all the work that you do. Truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes, and that's exactly where I was going to start with Lambi on the console and Sherwin in the studio. Thank you so much for providing the technical support. And I think, Lynton, you hit it on the head because we all have expertise in different areas. So my academic area is psychology. We have expertise in so many different areas in Dominica, and it's a lot more than about talking. I think we've spent way too many years talking about, what the hindrances and what is stepping in the way, yet we see the examples of what is possible. So that is what I want us to latch on to. I want us to latch on to what is possible, where are the opportunities, and so we will do so for every industry. So this evening and the last program, we explored agriculture, and we already have our program lined up for the next 2 weeks. We'll be talking about education because we all know how COVID-19 has changed the landscape of education. So now is the time to reimagine education. So join us June 23rd. We have our experts lined up. We're going to tap into their expertise and we're going to look at how do we reimagine education and where the opportunities lie in education so we can continue to take actionable steps to advance Dominica. And if you guys have any resources that you would like to share with us as we begin to build a database of information and resources that will help Dominicans at home and abroad to be economically independent, to create livelihoods for themselves, then I would encourage you to email it to me at pushpast10.com. So it's PUSHPAST, the number 10.com. And again, my name is Simone Mathieu, and I am so happy to the Q95 listeners at home and abroad who joined us for this program. And I especially want to thank everyone on Facebook who made a valuable contribution. And I am disappointed that we were not able to take your calls, but as you know, this is a work in progress. So we will get it right as the weeks continue. So thank you for being here with us for another episode of Roots Connections on Q. And I look forward to continuing this journey with Dominicans at home and abroad as we continue to find ways to create new paths to advance our lives. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of the program. Lynton, Halima, Machel, thank you for being here with us. And thank you for your contribution to the development of Dominica. So until next time, you guys have yourself a wonderful evening, and thank you one more time.
Okay, now.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.